Well, good morning and welcome to the December 12th Pre-State Allocation Board Forum. I'm Fred Yeager with the Department of Education. I'll be leading off today. Couple things to talk about today. The first one is, as many of you know, Ken Fengelder, one of our longtime staff down in San Bernardino County, is retiring at the end of this month. So he's been with us since 1999, I believe. So he's moving on. So if you worked with Kent and have projects going, your new contact will be Bedelia Honeycutt. And we'll be looking at staffing and other things in January. So but call Bedelia for the time being. A couple other things I want to talk about was Proposition 39 of 2012. We call it that because it could be confused with the Proposition 39 of the charter schools, and then the Green Ribbon Award. So briefly, the Proposition 39, this was the initiative passed in November that addressed out-of-state taxation. And it will provide, among other revenues, a hope for $500 million for a clean energy fund, which can be used for clean energy retrofits, and job creation. And the schools will get a chunk of that. So there will be implementing legislation to make all that happen. And here are some of the bills that will be doing that. So keep an eye on these. You can see Senate Bill 39 by Senator DeLeon and President Steinberg, President Pro Tem Steinberg, and Assembly Bill 39 by Mr. Skinner and Speaker Perez. And then AB 29 deals with higher education. So keep an eye on those. And then finally, the Green Ribbons Award program was due to us yesterday. And we will be doing our review and forwarding to the feds in February, our 4 schools, and then the federal program will be awarded in May. So that's all that's really happening today in CDE. So Sue Reese is now doing that.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for watching, for those of you who are out there and those that are here today. Today's State Allocation Board meeting will be at 2 o'clock at the State Capitol, and it's room 447. Our slide here is depicting the bonds that are available. We've had some fund releases between September and October, and as you can see, we have the new October bond sale available with $363.9 million. And we have the chart that is showing our remaining bond authority, and this represents all bonds. So we still have some funds available, or authority available, in all the programs currently, representing $717.8 million. And this is as of today's date. For today's agenda, we have a fairly light calendar. One of the highlights is that we will be presenting priorities and funding. We have $383.8 million to distribute, and that's going to represent about 196 projects to about 90 school districts. So with that, districts, please keep in mind that you need to present your fund release, your 50-05s, to this office by March 12th, 2013. It's a 90-day timeline in order to get your funds released. Also on the consent agenda for the first time, you will see an unfunded list, lack of authority. There will be more explanation on this in our presentation today. But for the lack of authority list, it's going to represent about 33 modernization projects in the amount of about $76.8 million. And again, we'll have more details in today's presentation of what the lack of authority unfunded list is. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nate to provide some reminders.
Hi, good morning. I just have 2 reminders for everyone today. First one is OPIC now has its own YouTube page. So now all the State Allocation Board meetings, subcommittee, implementation committee meetings are available for easy viewing on any variety of web browsing devices. So I'm just going to show you really fast kind of how it looks. Okay, so this is OPICU, his webpage right here. You'll see a feature video. You'll see links to the homepage, our building blocks publication. What's handy about this is that as you go down and look at it, you have featured playlists by year and meeting type. So you have implementation committee, SAB rules and procedures, cash management. You have all the meetings now that are easy to watch and see agenda highlights through going back to 2009. And what's nice about this as well is that if you go up, you'll see that you can actually subscribe to this channel on YouTube. And when new videos are uploaded onto OPSC's YouTube page, you'll get a friendly reminder through your email account. So it's really nice to have that. We're going to have an icon on our main OPSC homepage that will take you straight to the YouTube page as well by the end of today. So I just want to kind of let everybody know about that. Encourage you to take a look at the playlists. We tried to really encompass everything that we have so far. So the other reminder that we have, as a general reminder, OPSC really encourages school districts to submit electronic plans in AutoCAD format with a copy of the Division of State Architects signed stamp from the approved plans. So we want to encourage you, if you can do that, to submit those plans to us that way. And that's all I have for reminders. I'm going to introduce now Dennis Schrader for our Labor Compliance Program update.
Hi, good morning. So the Labor Compliance Program can be construed as just kind of being tricky. So I just kind of want to clarify. So pursuant to Assembly Bill AB 1506, LCP is required for all SFP projects funded from either Proposition 47 or Proposition 55, and the notice to proceed date is either on or after April 1st, 2003. And it's very important to understand what funding source that the project is being funded from. That'll determine if it's the Labor Compliance Program, and also what was the construction contract award date. So Proposition 1A and Proposition 1D, they're not subject to AB 1506 LCP requirements, regardless of the construction contract award date, but they are required to AB 436, the Compliance Monitoring Unit. So projects where the construction contract was awarded after January 1st, 2012, they're not subject to these requirements. However, it's very important to understand that the districts, they're still required to notify the Department of Industrial Relations at the time the district awards the initial public works construction contract using the PWC 100 form. The LCP requirements, they're prescribed in Labor Code Section 1771.5. So Assembly Bill AB 1506, it actually specifies that the State Allocation Board cannot release funds until it receives a written finding that the school district or districts has initiated and enforced or contracted with a third party to initiate and enforce a Department of Industrial Relations DIR approved LCP. SAB approved Regulatory Amendment 1859.97. It clarifies the LCP written finding requirement pursuant to Labor Code Section 1771.7 D2B. It provides an alternative method for districts to qualify for funding in cases where the construction contract was signed prior to the district contracting with a third-party LCP provider. So the next slide actually shows a graph. And I just want to make sure that everyone fully understands this graph. So the construction's awarded prior to 1/1/12. Okay, so and then the construction begins in 30 days. So they have their prevailing wage monitoring in place. They have their payroll records in place. And it was within the 30 days, which is Labor Code Section 1771.7. So if you take a look over here, the district doesn't contract with the third-party LCP provider until June 1st, 2012. Okay? At that time, they need to get a second third-party LCP provider to actually verify that this work had taken place. So it's going to cover the gap between when the construction was awarded prior to January 1st, 2012, all the way to where they contracted their first labor compliance provider. So prior to January 1st, 2012, when submitting the authorization for fund release, Form SAB 5005, a district must provide written verification indicating that the district or third-party provider submitted an applicable LCP application to the DIR. The written verification indicates the district or third party's LCP is approved by DIR and has not been revoked at the time of implementing the LCP. The submission of the report must be from an LCP provider that has been approved by the DIR, and we actually have a new web page just dedicated to LCP, and a list of providers is listed for the districts, all the third-party providers that DIR approves. And the approval has not been revoked as of the date of the report, 1859.97B3. The third-party provider that completes the report cannot be the same third-party provider with whom the district contracted to implement the LCP for the project. And that's what I was explaining earlier. So the written finding requirement, the third-party LCP provider, they're required to submit the report to the OPSC and DIR, which includes the following: verification that the applicable duties were performed on the project, verification that the LCP began within 1 month after the commencement of the construction work as set forth in Labor Code Section 1771.7. Written record of the LCP's confirmation of monthly payroll records pursuant to Title 8, California Code of Regulations, Section 16432, Subdivision C. The additional requirements, they have to provide a notice to each worker that the district has submitted the written finding report, and the workers may contact the OPSC and DIR directly concerning the accuracy of the findings. The report's not acceptable if DIR notifies us within 60 calendar days that it's determined the report to be incorrect. And the third-party provider that completes the report cannot be the same third-party provider with which the district contracted to implement its LCP for the project. So currently the district could actually submit their 5005 and the written finding requirement together. However, after July 1st, 2013, the districts must submit the third-party LCP written report. This is the new PIF requirement, which is 1859.90.2A4. Pursuant to Section 1859.97B. So they must submit this to the OPSC and the DIR at least 60 days prior to submitting the Form SAB 5005. And this will prevent interference with the priority funding deadlines. They must also have an acknowledgement on the written statement, just indicating that the district wishes to participate in the priority funding round. Just kind of hypothetically, if a district were to submit this report 60 days prior and DIR actually revoked the written report, we would not release funds until we received Department of Industrial Relations approval. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'd now like to introduce Lena Lyda.
Thanks, Dennis. Good morning. In September, regulations were presented to the State Allocation Board to address applications being received beyond the bond authority. These regulations impact the way we process all new applications at the Office of Public School Construction. The regulations were recently approved by the Office of Administrative Law on November 1st, and we wanted to provide you an update. We will talk about applications received before October 31st, on or before. These will be fully processed and placed on a true unfunded list. Beginning with today's board, we will begin to see these being presented. And we will also discuss applications received on or after November 1st, which will not be fully processed. Once they are complete, they will be placed on a beyond authority list in date order and presented to the State Allocation Board for acknowledgement. I'm going to introduce Dia, who will now provide details on this new process. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. They did give an update, as Lena indicated, at last month's pre-SAB meeting. It was a little bit more detailed, but we wanted to go ahead and move forward and remind everyone about that these regulations have passed, as Lena indicated. The new regulations on this current slide require districts to include a school board resolution. This is a new requirement. This is required to be submitted with your application for funding. In the board resolution, there are 5 statements that must be included on this, okay, that the school board actually acknowledges. And if the application requests financial hardship funding, there is also an additional 6th statement that must be included as well. These statements are listed in the new regulations, and they are also included on the sample school board resolution that is available on the OPSC website. Just to make a note of this, the school board resolution must be site-specific, so each site must list the scope of each project. And so I just wanted to make mention of that just in case there was any confusion. This is also, like I said, available on the OPSC website, so hopefully everybody's had a chance to go ahead and check that out and take a look at it. The next slide, the new regulations impact the review of eligibility determination documents and that they will not be fully processed. However, if the district plans to submit a new construction funding application, they must comply with existing regulations, and this requires the district to update its new construction eligibility prior to or concurrently with the funding application. This would also apply in the event that sufficient bond authority becomes available to process the funding application. Our next slide is regarding the financial hardship approvals. The new regulations do suspend the financial hardship pre-approval reviews. As we all know, under the old regulations, districts requesting financial hardship funding, they were required to get a pre-approval by the OPSC and to include a copy of their pre-approval letter with their funding application. Under the new regulations, a financial hardship district will submit its funding application without going through the pre-approval process. Instead of a pre-approval letter, the district will include an additional acknowledgement in the school board resolution. This is the 6th required statement that I had indicated earlier that's on that sample resolution. And this statement basically recognizes that financial hardship approval will be required before the application could be processed to the SAB for approval. And if you were watching the last SAB, this chart was also presented at that time. And basically what this chart is explaining is it provides the application receive dates that determine which list each application will be placed on for new construction and modernization projects. Applications processed for the unfunded list for a lack of AB 55 for new construction applications will be received prior to July 12th, and modernization applications received prior to May the 3rd. And in the second section, applications will be processed for the true unfunded list for new construction applications received from July the 13th through October the 31st. And then for modernization applications received from May the 3rd through October the 31st. The new construction and modernization applications that are received, which is in the next column, the acknowledged list, those are received on or after November the 1st. And again, these will be accepted and placed on the acknowledged list for presentation to the SAB. Also, we wanted to make mention to keep in mind that these dates are estimated dates and they can change. And also, this chart is available on the OPSC designated page. That's the applications received beyond bond authority. This next slide is an example of a funding shell that has been presented to the SAB for approval within the timeline to be processed for a lack of AB 55 loans unfunded list. Basically, I just want to point out the highlighted areas that indicate the fund code and proposition and funding source. This is a shell that everyone has seen already in past board items. And as you can see, this funding shell has the blurb indicating, pursuant to the board's action on March the 11th, 2009, that this application has been approved and placed on the unfunded list. Like I said, this is a shell that has already been presented to the board. You guys are very familiar with this. And this is basically just to show you an example of what has currently been presented versus this next slide, which is an example of how projects will be presented to the SAB for applications received within the timeline for the true unfunded list. And basically, the highlighted areas, again, show a different fund code than the last funding shell. And then also the new blurb that's at the bottom will indicate, pursuant to SFP regulations section 1859.95, that this application has been approved and placed on the unfunded list. It also states that this approval does not constitute a guarantee or commitment of future state funding and should not be relied on in any manner as any kind of representation or indication of future state funding. It also indicates the state cautions any kind of reliance on the fact that an application is placed on this list, and along with the dates provided in the chart, these funding shells will hopefully help districts know which list that each of their projects will be placed on. So we just wanted to provide you an example of the differences. And this is a shell that will be presented again at the SAB today. So this is just an example to show you the difference. Again, we do have a designated web page for the applications received beyond bond authority. And this page basically provides school districts and other constituents that of the new regulations, and it shows the timeline that we already had gone over. So it has that chart to show the dates of what your application would be placed on. And it also has that sample school board resolution that has all of the 6 required statements, well, the 5 and then the 6 for if you have a financial hardship district. And it also has frequently asked questions. And then also, as far as the outreach plan, we are still in the development process of an outreach plan. So we just want districts to look out for future updates via email blasts, OPSC publications, and also on the OPSC website, because that is updated frequently. And he's here. Do we have any questions regarding? Yes, Corinne. As far as I understand, they should be separate. Yes, that is sufficient. Yes, I think that should be fine, as long as it indicates the actual site that it's at and what is taking place in the project at that specific site. Yeah, that should be sufficient. No, that should be sufficient, as long as we know what's actually taking place at that site. Yes,
As long as it has the scope.
yes, you can put multiple projects within the resolution, but each of them must state the actual site and exactly the scope of the project. So as long as it lists each of them, then that's okay. You can bulk it. You're very welcome. Yes. Yes, it's up to the receive date, as Brian indicated.
Put that chart.
Hang on, let me see. Yeah, hang on one second. Okay. You go ahead.
No, just, it's based on the receive date, based on the chart here for the, modernization. We're still basing it on the receive date of when it's received by OPSC.
So since the regulations were passed on November the 1st, if you submitted an application today, it would not be processed.
It'd
Because
just be
it's after the
acknowledged.
November the 1st. Correct.
Right. Even, right, we're checking for completeness at this point. It'll be we'll do just like your regular art process is that we'll be checking for all the applicable documentation, and then we'll send a letter saying whether or not it's complete or for missing documentation.
It'd be the same, like the 24-hour notice that
Yeah.
you receive if there's any missing documentation from art, then you would still receive that same letter.
The resolution
For eligibility documents? No,
Only
just for
for
funding.
funding? Yeah.
Any additional questions? Okay, that concludes the pre-SAB presentations. Thank you.